Hey, Adobe Live family. Welcome back to another live stream. If you're joining us live, let us know in the chat where you are tuning in from. My name is Brittany Megan. I'm going to be your host for today. And we're so excited because we have the beautiful and talented lettering artist and children's book illustrator, Shauna Lynn, for an exclusive behind the scenes look at her process as she's going to create a beautiful, vibrant, pride-themed digital mural using Photoshop. Welcome, Shauna.
Hi, thanks for
We're
having me.
Of course, we're so excited to have you. Please let us know a little bit about yourself and how you kind of
Yeah.
stepped into the world of illustration and lettering.
All right, I can do that. Well, hello, everyone. Those who don't know me, I'm Shauna Lynn. I'm a lettering artist and children's book illustrator. I have been working in the field since the end of 2010. I've worked in agencies, I've worked in-house, and I've been freelancing since February of 2013. I started my freelance journey by doing just lettering, and I did mainly lettering for probably the first 7 or 8 years of my business. And then the panini hit, and I had to pivot a bit and figure out kind of what my next steps were, because I was doing a lot of live events. I was doing a lot of Adobe Live out in San Francisco. I was doing a lot of work travel, working conferences and things, and doing like live demos and such. And then of course, like the shutdown completely dried all of that up. So I was doing a lot of streaming from this chair with Adobe for those first few months. And I realized that just lettering wasn't really fulfilling me as much as it had been. And I was not really sure what to do without all the live, doing a lot of like the live in-person events. So I'd realized that I had been avoiding doing children's books for a long time, because anytime you tell someone you're an illustrator, the first thing they say is, "Oh, I've been writing this kid's book and I've been looking for an illustrator." And I never wanted to get into a position where, like, because a lot of times that happened like I have figure skate, so it happened like at the ice rink with people, and I was like, I don't want to go to the ice rink and then have to talk business. So I started exploring children's book illustration during that time. And I reached out to an agency in October of 2020 for representation, with absolutely no experience in children's books and no portfolio for children's books. And so the agent I reached out to, he and I had met several years earlier when he was working at a publishing house. And so we connected, got on a phone call or video call, Zoom call. And at the time he was like, "It's a not right now. However, I would like to see what your work looks like for, this, this, and this. And then let's touch base in a couple months." And so he reached out in January of 21. He said, "How's it going?" I said, "I think it's good." I sent him a bunch of stuff, and then I heard nothing. And I was like, oh, there goes my chance. So a month later, yeah. So a month later, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to shoot my shot. I put everything into a PDF and I emailed him and I said, "This is everything I've done so far. I've worked on this, 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 and this. And I know that I still need to work on, X, Y, and Z. But I wanted to show you at least where I'm at right now." And he wrote back, he goes, "Great, I'll look at this at lunch." And it was like not even an hour later, I got a message. He goes, "This is fantastic. Have I sent you our contract? I'd love to represent you." So I've been with the Cat Agency since February of 2021. And I have done 5
That's
children's
incredible.
books.
That's
Yeah.
insane. And I feel like that's so cool to see your story. I'd love to kind of see a little bit of your work if you can pull some of it up. I know
I
I've
sure
already kind of looked
can.
into this on my end, but when the Adobe Live community sees this, I think that you guys are going to be so in awe with how talented Shauna is.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, so this is some of my work. I have to do some updating on my portfolio and kind of redesign and stuff, but I've been at children's books now for about a little over 3 years. I've got a book coming out next month called Happy Halloween Teal Pumpkin. I believe it's on here. Yes. So it's Happy Halloween Teal Pumpkin. It is to raise awareness for the Teal Pumpkin Project, which is a project aimed at helping children who have allergies be able to enjoy trick-or-treating. So if you are a house that is a like safe for allergies house, you give out like pencils and stickers and like things that aren't candy, so that those kids that have allergies can go trick-or-treat at your house.
That's
Um,
amazing. And I feel like one of the common themes that I'm seeing in a lot of your work is there really is a message behind everything. And it really is to help educate. And I think that that's why stepping into this Pride mural that we're going to be creating today, I think is going to be so incredible because there's such a big mission and message behind it, right?
yeah, and and I think it's important to, support that community. I'm an ally. I have a lot of friends that are part of that community, and it's and a lot of people that I really truly love that are a part of that community. Um,
We're so excited. And I feel like
yeah.
whether, you're an ally or you're part of the community, we're so excited to have you here. So why don't we go ahead and jump in and start looking at what you have to start with your mural, Shauna?
All right. Well, so I'm going to preface this because we only have an hour and well, less than an hour and a half. I want to be sure that like I finish everything, and I've learned over the years that I can't start to finish easily on a stream if I don't have something already pulled together. So we're going to cooking show this. So I've got steps ready to go so that I can be, we can keep moving forward, but I will be showing my process during this time as well because I had fun creating it already. I'm going to create it a second time. We're going to have a lot of fun doing it. So,
I'm so excited and we're so excited to see this. And we have a lot of people in the chat saying that they're excited too.
oh, good. I'm excited about that. Um, and if, oh, good, temporarily my Cintiq has stopped running the fan out of nowhere. So if it gets really loud again, let me know and I'll adjust the position of my microphone because it just likes to rev up randomly. Um, I have chat up too, and I see a lot of people I know. Hi guys. Um, okay, so I have this rough sketch I've done, and it's around the theme Love Out Loud, which I think is important for anyone, whether you are a part of the community or not, not necessarily in the community, but an ally or just anyone in general. I think it's important. Love out loud, tell people you love them, show, show who you are, be yourself. So I really liked this phrase, love out loud. And I wanted to just, make it really fun to look at. So the lettering is sort of the focus. There's going to be some floral elements that are supporting elements.
I love this so
So
much. And I have a question for you, Shauna. When it comes to
yeah.
choosing your lettering, what was, I guess, in the back of your mind when you were choosing which lettering to use for this?
So I kind of have like a one style thing that I do. Um,
Okay.
I
A
used to be,
signature style. We love that.
yeah, like what I did used to be a lot more varied in terms of styles. And if I have to do something that has a lot of lettering, I will I'll vary it up a bit depending because like I did a mural for Prudential several years ago that was printed, and that one I did use a few different styles just so that it wasn't so same across the whole thing. In this regard, though, I have this one style that I do. It's a mix of cursive and print, and I just always think it's really fun. And it's one of those that I kind of make decisions as I go. And with this, I wanted it to be easily read. I wanted the legibility to not be compromised, but I also wanted the lettering to be the big focus, and I wanted it to have a lot of impact to it.
I love that. And you can definitely see that. And I think even with the decorative flowers and everything around it, I'm so excited to kind of see how the colors all come to life with this.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. So I have what I start with is a skeleton. So what I just call it the skeleton. Basically, I just write it out. Um, and then from there, I'm going to go create another layer and I'm going to write it out again, but I'm going to try to fill in these weird areas we have here where there's a lot of openings so that it fits together more like a puzzle.
I love that.
So, and if anyone has questions, by all means, I'm happy to answer.
Was Photoshop always a platform that you used, Shauna, or did it take you a while to learn it?
It's actually always been the program I use. There was a period where I used, oh shoot, what was that? What's that? Corel Draw, or Corel
Okay.
Paint. I used that years ago before I really learned brushes in Photoshop. Just because I loved digital painting, and it was in college that I started illustrating in Photoshop, like digital illustration. I started in Photoshop and I did it with a mouse. I was in like ninth grade, taking a computer arts class, and they ended up. I got not a Cintiq. I got a Wacom tablet for Christmas that year because there was this commercial, and I feel like I'm going to age myself with this because I don't know that a lot of people will remember it, but it was called Campbell's Soup at Hand. Um, and it was this drinkable soup, which is now a totally normal thing, but it was like really revolutionary back then, where you heated it up in a microwave and you had this, this little cup of soup that you could just drink. And so the commercial had this woman drawing on this like basically Intuos tablet and drinking her soup. So she's going nice and slow, but then her whole hand is like sped up and she's creating the art that was on the can at the time. And I remember my mom and I saw that commercial and my mom goes, "You need that thing. What, I don't know what that is, but you need that thing." And she managed to find one. And so that was like kind of the last time I ever illustrated with a mouse. After that, I switched to the to a tablet and I never looked back. But
I feel like it's different, right? It's a totally, and I think you got to find what works for you is the most important thing. Some people will prefer a mouse, others will prefer a tablet. And I think that's the beauty in finding your own creative workflow.
yeah, totally, I agree. And it's like I used an Intuos for a lot of years before I got a Cintiq, and I got a Cintiq back when they released the 13 HD. And that one made a huge difference because I could already draw, but it made my work more accurate. So I was wasting less time like redrawing the same thing over and over.
Right.
And trying to think, when did I switched like late college. I think I switched to illustrating in Photoshop because I was doing, I think I used Corel for a very short period, just because everything else I was doing was in Photoshop, and I was like, it doesn't make sense to bounce programs.
Right.
So I ended up learning, I at the time, if I did lettering, I actually would draw it out analog, so like on pencil and paper. Then
Okay.
I'd use tracing paper, clean it up, and then I'd scan it in, and then I would put it into Photoshop and I'd invert and I'd do all kinds of stuff with it from there. So I didn't actually draw in Photoshop until Kyle started putting brushes out. And it was once he started releasing brushes, I started playing with those, and it was like a whole new world had opened up for me, and I was like, this is amazing. And it
Which
was
is
at that point that
incredible.
yeah, it was at that point that I started doing more sketching and stuff in Photoshop, and more start to finish in Photoshop. And then several years back, I got an iPad, iPad Pro, and I had to eat my words because I remember when it first came out, I was like, there's no way that I would ever be able to work like on an iPad. I could never
It's different,
do.
like pen to paper, pencil to paper, and then you're trying to go to an iPad. And I think that's something that a lot of illustrators struggle with.
Yeah, well, and it was because there wasn't like a dedicated program yet, like no Procreate or anything quite yet. And then they came out with the next generation iPad, and they came out with the new pencil, and I went to Creative South, and my I had a Surface Pro at the time, and I was waiting for it to boot up, and all of my friends had opened up their iPads and they're already drawing, and I'm still waiting for the thing to boot, and I'm like, well, it looks like I might be getting new equipment when I get home. And it was like a few days after Creative South, I went to my mom and I was like, you want to go to the Apple store? And
It's so great. I feel like when you can be inspired by other people, and I know there's so many different things. If you're somebody that draws on a tablet or an iPad, or you're just kind of making that transition, you can get screen protectors that have that paper feel now, which is so nice.
Mhm.
And I think such a game changer. We have lots of people in the chat saying that they remember the original cup of soup and are
Good,
excited
I'm
to
not
be here too.
alone.
No, we're not old, girl. And I just want to shout out a few people in the chats. I see Wade, Keys, Nicole, hello, hello, Robert, Mariban, hello, and thank you all so much for tuning in. We do have a question in the chat asking, in terms of, I guess, using Photoshop. And again, this really comes down to personal preference, I think. But is there a reason why you chose Photoshop over Illustrator?
Yes, because Illustrator, I can't. get the same effect as I do in Photoshop. Photoshop allows me to create work that looks like legitimate, like pencil and paper and paint and like analog tools, whereas I do use Illustrator. I just don't use it for like my kids' books because I don't get that same really nice tactile effect.
And it looks organic, I think, to your organic drawing, right?
Yeah. And there
I
like there's
love that.
people that can do some incredible stuff in Illustrator. Don't get me wrong, but um I've done this for so long in Photoshop that it would be hard for me to try to like adapt my style to a completely different like medium essentially.
Right. And I think one of the things too is a lot of people don't realize even that you can do this in Photoshop. I know it was just recently that I realized, wait, Photoshop is not just used for photo editing. Like there's so much other things that you can do within this platform, which makes it so incredible.
Yeah, and it really is amazing. And then I use Adobe Fresco as well. I'm a huge Fresco fan. Um and so like when I got an iPad, one, it completely changed my workflow. All of a sudden I was no longer tethered to my desk and I was drawing even more, which ended up being a good thing for me because it pushed my skill set forward even more and it was a little bit of a quicker adaptation for me. Um and I moved to Chicago at the end of 2018, and I spent 2019. A lot of my time was spent traveling, either for work or for weddings. So I was on the road a lot, and so the thing that was really great about the iPad is it let me continue working on the road. So like I remember went to my childhood best friend, her wedding, and I flew down to Florida. And on the flight down, I got an email from an art director at a magazine, and he says, "Hey, I really would like to hire you for this cover job, but do you have time? I would need the sketch by Monday." And it was like Wednesday, Thursday. No, it was like Tuesday or something because I had like 2 days in Orlando before I went to her wedding. But so I like started working on it, and I had to like really tighten up sketches and everything. And so I remember I finally got to her wedding in Palm Coast, and I was like, "Listen, I love you. I want to focus on your wedding this weekend, but I have this due Monday, so I'm going to take this morning and I'm just going to knock this out so that the rest of the weekend I can focus on you." And it was great
Right.
because I worked from a balcony, and I in a few hours I got everything knocked out, got it sent off, it was done, and then I got to focus on what I needed to focus on.
Which I feel like is so awesome because I think like when you have supportive friends like that, I know it's hard in the creative industry too, because you kind of got to run with those, I want to say wins when you get them. And I
Yeah.
feel like it's one of those things, right? So question for you is if you're ever on a tight deadline, and I know it's hard to rush the creative process, but what are some things that you kind of, I guess, do to help yourself meet those tight deadlines without feeling like you're jeopardizing that creative flow?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Um, I'm so used to working under pressure because my time management skills are awful. Um, so I actually work really well under pressure. I have to, it's harder. I actually have to like force myself to work on things ahead of time so that I pace myself.
Right.
Um, but I find that like if I'm really struggling with something, sorry, I just like moved and my entire desk was like, let's make
We're
a
getting really good into the chat when the cameras start moving and we're like getting comfy, right?
yeah. I can't, no, I can't sit normally in a chair. One, I'm too short. I have a footstool because I can't reach the ground. But two, I have to sit like a little goblin. I can't just like sit with my feet dangling, and I can't like put my feet on the stool because I feel awkward because I have to sit in weird positions. So currently I am as crunched as I can get in this chair, and I am comfortable, and that's how it should be.
That's the
Um,
key, right?
exactly. So what was I saying? I forgot.
Getting into your creative flow. You're not normally somebody who has the best time management skills, and that's okay because you're creative.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so what I end up doing is I'll switch up my environment, which is why the iPad's so great, is because I can do almost the entire project, if I'm working on a project, I can do almost the entire thing on my iPad. Um, the only thing I can't do on my iPad is like if I'm sending stuff to a book client or whatever, I have to convert to CMYK. Um,
Okay.
and that's the only thing I can't do on the iPad. So there's a lot of times that I've done full book spreads on in like Adobe Fresco. It saves to the cloud and I just walk over to my desk and I finish everything there. Um, I'm at that point where I think I need to upgrade the iPad, but I'm holding out until the absolute last second, because it's kind of chugging along when my files get a little too big and I am really, it's like 200 layers or nothing.
Right.
I am very much a layer queen, so I need I need a little more power than what my iPad's now giving me, but it has done, like, it has paid for itself like 1,000 times over with how much I've managed to do with it. Um,
And
and
we love a
so
layered queen. So we love that.
yeah, it's a way to do it.
I'm
It is the
curious
way.
to know in the chat who uses an iPad to illustrate if you are an illustrator or if you prefer a mouse. We'd love to know. We have a few other people popping into the chat that I wanted to say hi. Megan says, two of my favorite Adobe Live guests. We love you, Megan. And we
Ah,
also have Lisa tuning in.
hello everyone. So right now I'm just outlining my skeleton, and generally it depends, kind of like if this is for a client, it would be a lot cleaner. Um, like if I had to get approval from a client, like this would be a way cleaner output. Although like I wish I could send stuff that was a little messier and not feel bad about it. But I've had too many instances of clients that are like, they look at things too literally.
Right.
Um, like you can see here, I sketch in colors, and it's just because it makes it more fun than sketching in black and white. And forgot to convert to grayscale before I sent off the file one time, and I had drawn the sketch in purple, and the client wrote back like, we like this, but we don't want it to be purple. And I'm like, it's just the sketch. Nothing about this is going to be purple. I just forgot to change the color.
And I think when you have the messier outlines too, it really adds to that like organic feel to what you're creating, which I think is so cool. I always loved like when I was in art school way back in the day, really looking at just a sketchbook and being able to see like every single little line or what was kind of created and how you created this incredible thing out of all these tiny little lines, right? Which is so awesome.
Yes. Are you one that you prefer your sketches over your finals often?
I feel like with a sketch, you can see the process, which is what I love. You can't really see the whole story when you look at a final, right? Which I think is so cool.
Yeah. There's a lot of times that I'm like, oh, there's so much more energy in this sketch. And then I'm like, but I can't, I gotta clean it up. I'm hitting a
Moving
point
over
where
to
like, oh, go
go
ahead. I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Shauna. No, you go
Oh,
ahead. I'd love to hear.
I'm hitting a point finally, like in my illustrations, where I feel like my finals are showing more energy that matches the sketches more
I
versus
love that.
feeling sterile and stale, and
And that
at
comes
least by
with
my
time, I feel
standards.
like, right? It comes with time, and you kind of just get more and more confident with your original idea. I think presenting that too. I know a lot of
Yeah.
artists or illustrators struggle with they have this idea or concept, but at the same time really wanting to meet maybe their clients' expectations. So you're kind of trying to find that happy medium. And that comes over time. We have a lot of people in the chat that are saying that they use a mouse but would like to use an iPad. Some people saying iPad with a pen. And we do have a question. Do you have the latency we saw on your screen? And if yes, how do you deal with that? I know some brush does that and it's hard to manage.
Oh, yeah, brush latency. It depends.
Latency, there we go.
Yeah. Um, has there been latency on there? Like, has it been slow on y'all's end? Because if so, I'm sorry. Um,
I think it looks good on my end.
Yeah, I know in previous streams I've had, there have been issues at times where it's been really slow, and part of that is just my computer. It's just the processor. There was a period where I was streaming on just like Behance on my own, and we discovered that the streaming software, um, it wasn't doing a great job at keeping up with my computer. So I had to find an alternative streaming software, which actually completely got rid of the latency. But in the grand scheme, like it's not bad. If you have a brush that's kind of big, it will cause issues, but that's going to be with any brush I think you use, especially, if you have one of those like top of the line, like I spent $10,000 on it computers, then you're probably okay. But like if I were to use, like I have got a bunch of brushes I've made, like here it's not bad. Like this size, it works just fine. But if I were to make it like ginormous,
It lags a little bit, right?
yeah, and that's going to happen no matter what because of the size it's at and what the brush is programmed with. Whereas like I have a photo editing brush. If I make it the same size, you're not going to have that same latency because there is let me get rid of all of that so I don't ruin my sketch. Because
I was
with
thinking for a second, I'm like, oh my gosh, don't ruin it, girl. It's so gorgeous.
Bless Command Z. Um, a lot of what it is too is like what you have programmed into your brush. So like this one, I have like texture, I have scattering, I have shape dynamics enabled. First, the gouache type brushes I've made, I've got color dynamics also involved. So that also has to factor in with how the brush is performing. And so because it's really large, all of that has to like really run in order to make it work and look correctly on screen, and look correctly in your document. But it ends up having to like scale everything, 1,000 times versus working at a smaller size. But like the general brushes, you're not really going to see much lag because none of that is enabled. The only time really that I would see lag on a small scale is if I were to take the smoothing and put it up. And even then, it's not that bad with this particular brush. Like you can see there's a little bit of lag, but not too terrible. And this is something that's good. Like if it's absolutely pertinent that you have smooth lines for something, the smoothing tool really does work in that regard. I usually have mine set on 10% because it's just enough to kind of clean it up versus like if I have it on 0, I risk like if I'm doing like a line, I risk a jitter when I draw. So I don't want to have to clean up too much, whereas 10% kind of gives me a little bit of wiggle room.
I feel like this really comes down to, I guess, personal preference too, and what you find works good for you, right, Shauna?
Yeah, it really does because everyone's going to do things a little differently. Everyone's process is going to be just a little bit different. And and there's nothing wrong with that because what works for me might not work for you, might not work for, the next person. And I've seen things that I'm like, oh, I'm going to try that. That looks like such a game changer. And I attempt to put it into my workflow and it just doesn't fit as well. So there's, all kinds of things where there's like, I'm like, oh, I love that brush. I'm going to use that. And I start to use it and it just doesn't mesh with my workflow. And so I abandon it.
I see a lot of people entering the chat, and we're so excited to have you here. For anybody that's just tuning in, we're here with the beautiful Shauna, who is a lettering artist and a children's book illustrator. And today we're creating a Pride themed digital mural in Photoshop. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Shauna, I wanted to know in terms of your design, I know we're really looking for that simplicity behind love out loud, which I think is so powerful on itself. But was there a story that really inspired this design in this mural or a personal experience?
To be honest, no.
And that's great
I
too.
Yeah, I was looking up, like I had a rough idea when I was approached for this live of what I wanted to do and like what it would eventually look like. Mostly because when I looked up different murals, I'm really drawn to ones that are like bright and colorful and have real bold elements. So I knew that's what I wanted to put into this. But then I started kind of Googling and looking up different like sayings for pride, and Love Out Loud was one that just I really liked it. It just felt right. Um, and I felt it was very powerful, and I feel like it applies to a lot of my friends that are in that community.
I love that.
Because
And I think
yeah.
even whether you're in the community or not, I think it really applies to everybody, which is so incredible, right?
Oh yeah.
I
I don't
love
think there's
that.
one person that this wouldn't apply to.
Very true.
So I'm going to do just a few of these just because I want to make sure that I have enough time to, get through the color and such. But we have the lettering. I have my sketch up on my screen so I can see what I've done so that I don't completely mess up what I've previously got sketched out, because I do have the sketch already finished in this file. Um, but I thought it might be kind of fun just to like, you can at least this way see what the process looks like.
And I
And I
think that
always,
makes it so great too, because then we really get to see again those coloring and every piece of this process coming to life, right?
yeah. And I like to draw in, I one thing I did when I did draw analog was I used colors then too, because what it would let me do was I could draw in a light color, and then every layer as I cleaned up, I'd use a darker color, darker color, darker color, so that when I scanned in, all I had to do was convert to grayscale and then adjust the levels, and I'd be left with just my clean rendering. And that has gone forth into this just because I think it's fun to draw in color, like I've said earlier. And but so I always drop the opacity though of the layer below it down, just so that I don't get too visually confused as to where I'm at. So we've got just very rough, very fun. I like having a lot of movement in my work. So I think this is one that I can achieve that here.
I love the different shapes of the flowers as well, Shauna. They're so stunning.
Oh, thank you.
Do you already, well, I guess you kind of already know which colors these are going to be, but when you were picking the colors, was there anything that I guess you wanted to keep in mind? Were you trying to really, you know, I want to say bring in the LGBTQ plus colors into this or the rainbows?
Actually did. Yeah, I wanted to use the um colors of like the pride flag, but because a lot of them are very much just the, standard RGB, Roy G. Biv colors. I wanted to kind of push them a little further. So I went on Pinterest and I started just looking up different color palettes for Pride, and I found a few that were pushed in a direction where they were almost a little more neon. And I
I
was
love
like,
that.
this. Yeah, I was like, this is it. I want this. Because if I were to like actually go and like paint this somewhere, I would be using like neonish, like really bright colors. Because I want it to stand out. So there's like a lot of pinks, a lot of orange, purple. Like the end product is really fun, I think. And I'm gonna put
I'm
it on
so
a dark
excited to see it.
background. And I'm putting it on a dark background too, so that makes it pop even more. And then I can show you guys too how I've gone and mocked it up on a stock photo, so you could, like, if you were to present to a client, you could say, this is what it's going to look like, this is what it could look like. um and it's a good way too, if you want to get into like doing murals and stuff, like just make a bunch of fake projects and mock them up.
And I think that's a great way to build your portfolio too. I know we have a lot of new students or recent graduates too that love tuning in. And I think one struggle is like trying to build and develop your portfolio if you haven't yet kind of gotten these projects to work on, right?
Exactly. And the fun thing with like, your own personal directed work, like, yeah, you can, there's a lot of people that'll say like you can do work on exchange for portfolio stuff with like real clients to get experience and such, but you're also still at the mercy of what the client wants. And it may not be something that you want to put in your portfolio. So if there's a certain thing you want to do, um, create the type of work you want to get hired for and only show the type of work you want to get hired for.
That's such a great tip, Shauna.
I've, I remember when I was graduating college, in the ye old days of 2010, um, where I went to school for graphic design. And so we were encouraged to learn kind of all the aspects. So we had to, learn coding, we had to learn branding, we had to learn illustration, we learned motion, we learned like everything. So we were like very well rounded in what we could do. But like, I sort of felt like I didn't really have like a specific thing that I was really good at in comparison to like having everything.
Right.
And like illustration was kind of the one thing that I was like, this I'm good at, this I could promote. And I remember my professors looking at my work because I knew for a fact, I was like, I don't want to do web. Because at the time I had to code it and I wasn't good at coding. I'm still not great at coding, but like at the time it was such a foreign concept to me. Like I could do basic HTML and CSS and that was kind of it. And I remember my professor looking at my portfolio for a review and he's like, you don't have any web in here. Like you're kind of pigeonholing yourself. And I said, that's okay. I was okay with that. And then I had an internship where I remember they had me work on a lot of real world projects. Like they were just an awesome agency to intern with. And I remember we all had like a competition in house to like come up with concepts for a web design that we were going to pitch to a client. And so they said, come up with an idea. We're going to throw your idea into this pool and see like what we share. And I remember the creative director came over and he looked at it and he's like, this is good. He goes, but I feel like you're designing only to what you can code. And I said, yeah. And he goes, yeah, Brandon over there, he's the one who's going to code this. Whatever you come up with, he can do. So just go nuts. And so, because he's like, we can pull back if need be, but I want you to like, don't let what you know how to do be your limitation. And that was honestly kind of really eye-opening for me because I was like, well, dang, that makes so much sense. Because all of a sudden, then I was like, I can really push this design. And then I really pulled in like illustrative elements and went crazy. And it turned out very good for what it was at the time. It didn't get picked, but the creative director was like, no, this is good. This is really good work. So keep going. And so where was I going? But creating stuff that you really want to put in your portfolio. That was kind of the thing that was like, I did not put web design in my portfolio because I didn't want to get hired for web.
And paying attention, I think, to like what you love doing, like what are the things that spark joy? Because it is a creative industry. And I feel like, you know, if you're doing something that's not number one, your zone of genius, or two, something you're super passionate about, you're always going to feel like not excited to work on the projects that you have going, right?
Yeah, and that's not to say you're not going to have, work gigs and projects that you're, always in love with. You're going to have stuff that you're just be like, I got to get it done. I may not love it, but I got
Right.
to do it. But showing people like what you're capable of and what you would like to do, I think is very powerful in terms of what you put into your portfolio. So, again, like if you want to create a billboard and you're just like, I don't know how to do, XYZ, that doesn't matter. Create, just because you don't know how to, code the billboard or whatever, that doesn't matter. Like do it how you would envision it and put it out there, because somewhere someone is going to be able to code it if that's something that were to happen. But your limitations shouldn't direct what your portfolio looks like.
I love that. That's such a great piece of advice. And we do have some new people tuning into the chat. Hi, Jeff. We're so excited to have you here. And if anybody has any questions for Shauna, please drop them in the chat. I mean, she is a book of knowledge, I feel like. So definitely ask away.
And what is it that Eliza, that comedian says she's the elder millennial? That's
I
the
love
old
that.
and wizened elder millennial. Okay, so we're gonna pretend that I did all of this over here. All of this. We're just gonna pretend I did it. So 3, 2, 1. Ta-da! There it is.
If
There's our
only it was that fast in real life, right?
seriously. But this is what the final sketch looked like when I finished the final sketch. But mostly just because I do want to make sure that we've got like 40 minutes to go. So I want to make sure that like by the 30-minute mark at the latest, I'm mocking up. So we are gonna run and see what we do here.
So at
Um,
this point, are we adding in colors now, Shauna?
yes.
I'm so excited to see these neon shades that you've chosen.
Boom. There they are.
Oh my gosh, they're stunning. They're a great pick.
So what I like to do is I will create a layer where I do just lay out the colors I'm going to use for an illustration so that I have them. And then if I'm doing a kid's book, I have a character sheet where I have all their colors next to it so I can just color pick to make sure that it stays consistent. And then I send that to the art director and the publisher so that they have the copy of it as well, so that they can be sure when they go through pre-press that the colors all match as well. But what I'll do is if there's things that I know off the bat that I'm going to need different shades for, I'll make the main color and then I'll do shades below it so that they're paired up.
That's such a smart idea.
I've got that. And then I already know that like I'm going to do this nice dark gray for the background.
The way that it pops with those colors, like I thought that they were popping before, but you're right, like the dark gray in the background is really going to allow them to stand out.
Oh yeah, it's going to be so much fun. So I have a bunch of brushes I make myself just because I have certain looks a lot of times that I'm like, I just want it to look like XYZ. And so just so for reference, so people know, like I'm working at 12:6 and I'm working at 450 DPI because I like working at a higher DPI so that I have a little wiggle room if I need to adjust the sizing of my piece. But it also lets me get a little more detailed in the nitty-gritty stuff when I need to do that. So
We have a lot of people in the chat that are loving these colors too. And Jeff is saying it looks awesome. And I didn't even see how you got started with this. He's a recent one tuning in. Nicole's saying those colors with lots of heart eye emojis. So
I'm going to take the sketch down in opacity just a little bit because I want you guys to still be able to see it. And I know that my contrast is a little weird here. Oh, that'll help. There we go. So all I did was apply a layer adjustment or a layer effect to the group. So now you can actually see the colors. And what I've done is I've created different keystrokes, like custom shortcuts. And one of mine, because I found I have to access the foreground color a lot, I set it so that the key N brings up my foreground color. So that way when I'm working, all I have to do is hit N and then I can grab my
which is
color.
so nice.
Yeah, like it makes my life so much easier. So, and then I also have, we're gonna be working with smart objects today. So I have for smart objects, it's for me, I do Command K. And it's already assigned to something and I just stole it. So I don't know. I don't remember what the standard Command K goes to. If anyone knows, feel free to, drop it in chat. But
Do you always start with coloring in the lettering first, Shauna?
it depends on the composition. For this, I am just because I wanted to get like I want to just get like one letter in there so people can see. But then I'm going to move over to it, to the florals just so you can see that process in action. Because what you'll see in this particular brush is that it changes color, and it's it's got a little bit of an opacity jump, so that it's not 100% opaque. It has got a little bit of transparency, and that was
And you
done on
can build on it,
purpose.
right?
Yeah, because what I did is I have the transfer set so that it has a little bit of opacity, and will and it's got like a little bit of flow to it, so it'll change based on like the pressure of the pen, how much it drops. And then I have color dynamics set. There goes my fan again. And this one I have the saturation up to 2% and the brightness to 2%. And just what that does is it changes the brightness and the saturation per brush stroke. And
That's
so
so
what
cool. And
that,
it really gives that realistic look to what you're doing.
yeah, it kind of makes it look like paint, which is really fun. And it adds a little more dimension to illustration work. So it gives it a bit more of a painted feel, which I think is really fun.
It is so much fun. And I think one of the coolest things about that is, again, like you're able to do this digitally. When you're painting something, it's a little harder to correct a mistake if you put, the wrong color in the wrong place. This is as simple
Yeah.
as, like you said, that Command Z, which is so helpful.
I always love I my little sister, she's 3.5 years younger than me, so she's not that little, but
She's
um
still a little sister.
she will always be my little sister. It doesn't matter if she's almost a foot taller than me. Um Actually, no, we discovered we used to think it was that I actually am a little taller than we thought. So it's like a 7-inch difference. But for years, she always wanted to draw. She would come to my apartment, and I always had to have like pencil and paper ready, because if I was sketching, she wanted to be sketching. And she enjoyed she liked the idea of sketching, but she hated if she made a mark she didn't like, erasing it wasn't enough because it couldn't completely
Right.
clean the paper, because OCD, and she's very open about
Right.
that. So I can, I'm not ashamed, she can deal. But what I thought was really amazing was the fact that like after I got an iPad, she saw that and she's like, oh, I want to get one. So she got an iPad, and she bought Procreate, and has been using that, because at the time Fresco wasn't available, and she doesn't have a Adobe subscription because it doesn't make sense for her to have one given that she does not work in the industry. Though I'd love to push her towards it, but she doesn't do enough to justify cost and things. Anyways, I digress. She started drawing on the iPad and was able to double tap to undo. And within about 6 months, I came home at the holidays and I look, and she's drawing an anatomically perfect hand. And I go, what the heck?
When,
When did you
where,
learn to
how?
draw? Yeah, I go, I went to school and I can't draw hands. Like, what happened? And so she ended up learning to draw because she could Command Z on the iPad. And it made all the difference for her because she could then have a clean sheet. So she does these like really cute little cartoons, of her life with her and her boyfriend and her dogs. And they're, perfectly her humor and adorable. And then I took one of the cartoons of when she and her boyfriend adopted a golden doodle 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago. And they just got a house recently. And so for their little housewarming that we all went to just to like celebrate, hooray, you're moved in. I had custom wine glasses made, stemless, because I love the doodle, but she's a disaster. I don't trust her around glass. But I had custom wine glasses made that have her illustration on it of her golden retriever hugging the doodle that she had
Aw.
drawn when she adopted the dog. And so she ended up, I missed her opening it. I was helping my dad bring something in, but I walked in and she's crying, and I go, what? She goes, I
She
drew
opened
that.
it.
Yeah. She said, that's
So
my art.
cute.
I drew that. I said, yeah, you drew that.
It's so crazy. And I feel like seeing your projects come to life. And this brings me into Key's question, I think, which is incredible, is of anybody you would know seeing these creations come to life being a children's book author. So, how is working with a printing house? Do they give you templates to work on, color or ink profiles specific to the workflow? And who signs off on the printing proof? The author, the editor, or the designer is what Keys is asking.
Wow. Okay. So there's several questions in one. So basically, the art director will give me the dimensions of the project. So they'll give me all the information. They'll say, this is the size with bleed, this is how much bleed we need, this is the gutter, etc. And so what I do is in Photoshop, I'll go up to view and I'll go to guides and I'll go to new guide layout. And let me zoom out on here so I can actually show you guys what it will do. Because if say this were like a kid's book spread, when I work in full spreads. So if there's spots, like all the spots go on and like it's laid out as if it were just an open book. So I'll go do new guide layout and I'll do columns, and they'll generally give me a PDF that says how much gutter there needs to be between the two pages, because they're going to fold in. So anything that's in
Right.
here, you will not see. So you need to be, like if I have lettering that goes across the page, I need to be aware of the gutter. So you'll see the illustration without, like if you just see the digital version, you'll see the word that looks almost split. But when
Right.
it's printed, it looks normal. But so I'll do it like this to where you get your bleeds, you get your gutter, and what's going to happen is you're not going to necessarily have a bleed on the interior center. Like you're going to have an area that you don't want any important content to go, because that's where it's going to disappear. But when you're figuring out the size, you have to do it with like bleed on just 3 sides. It's a lot of like math to figure out, and it took me several books to figure all that out, but that's
You're
how
like,
I
I'm an
go about it.
illustrator, not a mathematician.
Yeah. And then what I'll do too is I will make I'll do like a black border where those rulers all go, so that when I'm working in Fresco, because Fresco doesn't have ruler guides like this, I'll have it to where it's just a layer I turn on and off so that I can make sure that everything that's important is encased where it needs to be. And then they'll
That's
give
so
me
cool.
yeah, and the client will also generally give me a rough layout too based on like the story. So I'll basically get a PDF of the story with nothing in it. Um, and they just will let me, they'll say like if you're, drawing and you think the words will look better somewhere else, just like move them around and we'll work with that. So I get a little freedom in that regard, but they'll tell me like, we really see these as spots, we see these as full page, we see this as a 2-page spread, etc. So once I'm done with that, I send it off to the art director. And I've only had one project where I've actually seen it between when I send it off and it being printed. And it's one that's coming out in the end of October called Who Took My Lollipop? They sent me proofs, and I'm really glad they did, because there were 2 shades of green I used that were way too close when printed, that they got muddy. And so I wrote to them and I was like, am I able to like adjust these and send it back to you, or is it too late? And they're like, no, send it over. We have not gone to print yet. These are just the proofs. So generally though, like I'll send off a color guide to my art director at whatever publishing house I'm with that shows what colors I used and all the codes for them. Just so that they can also be sure that they're matching up on their end. Because if they're using a different color profile than I am, that will mess up the colors. And I
Right.
discovered that on a book recently where I'm like, every time I popped into Photoshop, I was like, the colors are changing. Like what I'm seeing in Fresco is not the same as what I'm seeing in Photoshop. And it turned out there were 2 different color profiles happening. So it was opening in Photoshop under one and it was opening in Fresco under another. And so that one was hard because I had to go and like page by page and adjust all the colors over again. Now that I think about it, it may have been the squirrel one that it did that, the lollipop one.
You like just had a moment where you're like, wait a second, that makes a little bit more sense now. But you know what? I think like that's a big learning curve for a lot of people is when you're seeing something digitally, it doesn't always look the same when you print it. So like finding that gap and how to fix that. and not getting, too overwhelmed when you do run into those things. And I think just trying to find that solution. So when you did run into that, what was kind of your steps to figuring that out and your next steps to correcting that problem?
Well, so the first part was I'd finished all the spreads and then I was going through and I noticed that they were all changing and it was like the day they were due. And so I emailed my art director and I said, can I get like a 1 day extension because this is happening? And I need to figure out why. And I said, I can't figure out what's going on. I said, but if I could send these tomorrow, I can figure it out and fix it. And they wrote back, they're like, yeah, that's fine. Totally fine. Because when you're working with art directors, they're going to build in additional time just in case anything happens.
Right.
And like my agents always said, if you need more time, you ask for more time. It's not like they will not ding that against you for asking for more time. And so I've had ones where like the client wants something due Friday and I'm like, can I get till Monday? And they let me. But a lot of times like that particular one, like I got to see the proofs, but after I sent off my feedback, I've not seen it since. So the next time I see it will be when I get artist proofs for it, like the actual book. But I did get to see they're doing spot gloss on the cover, which I'm really excited about.
I'm sure it's such a surreal feeling seeing your illustrations come to you in like a physical book form and just knowing that you were part of that process and you really designed everything that people are seeing.
Yeah, it's really fun and it's very rewarding. Which color did I use? I used this blue. Yeah, it's incredibly rewarding to see, and my mom has always joked for years that I'm a professional doodler because we can like my family never quite understood what I did for a living. Um, Now that I actually do kids books, they get it because there's a physical thing that they can see. It also does not hurt that like my friends and family are all having babies. So
You're
I
like,
have
I
like
have the
immediate
best
gifts.
presents.
Oh yeah. And it's fun because like I got one girlfriend, her daughter calls me Auntie Shauna. And I went down to Florida in November to go see I went down for a wedding and before I went down, I stayed in Orlando for a few days to see some friends I hadn't seen in a while. And then I had like time to kill between when my best friend got off work and when I had to check out of the hotel. So I was like, I'm just gonna go to my hometown and go visit my aunt and two of my friends that are still in that area. And it was sort of last minute, but they were both everyone was just like, yes, come by, I want to see you. And my one friend with the daughter who calls me Auntie Shauna, she goes, she was she was carrying around she loves the book Monsters on the Broom that I did. She goes, she was carrying it around and she goes, my Auntie Shauna did this. And she's holding it.
Aw.
And then she goes, and then you knocked at the door. She goes, and she was a little like stunned because she opened the door and all of a sudden Auntie Shauna's standing there and she had no idea. Um, and this, it's little things only see me in person twice in her life. So she was a little like, hold on, and kind of did like, wait, that and that, this same person type of thing.
Yeah.
So, but it's really fun. And then in that same trip too, I got to see my childhood best friend and I met her daughter because the last time I'd seen her, she was still pregnant. And the girl, the child, I think was 18 months when I finally met her. And I brought two of my books down for her that I hadn't managed to send yet. So we all met up for dinner and I handed her the books and watching this little 18-month-old look at these, it was early readers. So they're, like she can't read them yet. She's 18 months, but she was
Right.
literally flipping through every page and like looking at the art on every page. And to get to see that in person is so cool.
Right.
Um, and my friends love it because they're just like, it's just fun for us to be able to say like, we know you. And, they send me videos of their kids reading the books and it's very rewarding. But again, it's really fun because now my family makes a lot of my extended family, my immediate family knew what I did, but my extended family, it's a lot of doctors, nurses, etc. So it's like they didn't fully
Right.
understand like what I did for a living, and now that I do kids books, so they get it.
It's so cool. And I think the cool thing about children's books specifically is I know even for me, like growing up, I had my go-to children's books that I feel like were just comfort for me, or it became part of, growing up, like your mom or your dad or your loved ones would read you a story before bed and things like that. So it kind of becomes part of your memories and your core memories as an adult too. So was there an author or an illustrator that you looked up to when you were little, Shauna? And we'd love to know in the chat too.
That is a fantastic question. What book did I was an avid reader as a kid. And I read, do you remember the American Girl books?
Yes, actually, I do.
I read those and I would buy those because I just loved American Girl, but because of the illustrations.
Right.
Um, and then there was this series, this like historical girls series where they looked like journals.
Okay.
And so like the pages, like the edges of the page were like
It showed
deckled.
doodles in there, right?
It was well, those were just cool because they were the way they were made, it was like deckled edges. And so there was like illustrations like on the chapter headers, basically.
I love that. And for me, I feel like I was very much into Robert Munch when I was very little. I don't know if you
Mhm.
remember Robert Munch. I feel like everybody has to.
What book?
Um, Thinking back now, I can't remember their titles, but one thing that I remember about Robert Munch books was there was so many, like his way of the illustrations in his books. It's like you would know by seeing them.
Yeah. Oh
And that's
man,
the thing is like I feel like anybody like you wouldn't even have to read the title or know the author to know by the illustration that that was a Robert Munch book.
yeah, it's probably one of those that I've seen and my brain is
Yeah,
not.
for
Yeah,
sure. Or did you ever read I Love You Forever?
I don't know. I don't think I did.
I'm curious to know in the chat. Maybe it's different here in Canada. Maybe we have a few different books that you guys haven't read yet.
I had like I remember things like the Golden Books and stuff when I was little. I was very much a
Right.
Disney child. Um, so I always liked like the Pokey Little Puppy and stuff.
Yeah.
But my parents were also very much of the fact that I wanted to read and I loved to read. They were all in, and so it wasn't out of the norm to like go to Barnes and Noble on a Friday night and let me get the next book in a series I was reading.
Oh, Nicole says, love Robert Munch, but obviously Dr. Seuss was one of her favorites. Dr.
Oh yeah.
Seuss
You can't go wrong with Dr. Seuss.
with green eggs and ham. Like, come on, everybody wanted green eggs and ham based on that book,
Oh
the
yeah.
illustrations.
Yeah, I think I'd have to say that I was definitely a an American Girl kid because I loved those illustrations and her name is I don't remember her name and I follow her on Instagram. I think it's like Renee Graff. I want to say her name is.
Okay, that sounds
Um
familiar.
yeah, and she did a lot of like the Kirsten books.
I'm looking now.
So yeah, it's wait, is this CMYK or RGB? This is RGB because I work in RGB because I can't get CMYK in Fresco. But what I do on Photoshop is I have the gamut warning on, which just means it will gray out any colors that would not print without like special inks. So anything that's in gray, we would be able to know like it doesn't work. So like I could even go up to here and do the gamut warning and I could see like none of these colors would print. But if I were painting this like by hand on a wall, I could get custom paints made to this color. So I would still do it that color, scheme. But so again, I want to make sure that we get this done and we're getting closer to the end. So we're going to
Oh
do
my
the
gosh, Shauna, this looks so good.
turn off my little sketch here. And I got to turn off there we go. Cause I have a live folder and a like of what I'm drawing in a not live folder.
That
Um,
looks so great.
so these would be what the color flats look like once they're done. And yeah, right, bud? Sorry, my dog just woke up and he's coughing. He's okay. Um,
Everybody is loving this. We have Wade saying woohoo. This
and
looks
then
so good.
we have the details. So what I ended up doing is like
Stunning.
on these hearts that are meant to be like the exclamation loud marks. These are clipping masks where I just did lines of color. Um, that one's in the color flats. I don't name any of my layers, so no judgment. But if I were to take the clipping mask off, you can see like that's just what it looks like. And then you can see where I blended the colors because it's a clipping mask on a group, and the group has this inline and it has these hearts as part of it.
I love how the Love Out Loud is following the rainbow right on theme for Pride Month. This looks stunning.
Oh, I lied. No, they're their own layer, but it's still a clipping mask. But what I love is if you look closely, you can see it kind of looks like paint.
It does. You're right.
That's like one of my favorite things about these brushes I've made.
I love the
So,
effects, like everything right down to like, and I think that's the cool thing about murals. Like, if this was being blown up really big, we were talking about this before, like painted murals versus digital. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, if this was going to be printed and put somewhere, how big do you think it would be? Where do you think it would sit, Shauna?
I would imagine it would be printed in vinyl, um, and it would either be like, hung on a store, or put on a window, something. Um, like this could be printed and hung in doors somewhere, like in a store display, things like that. All right, we're gonna we have an Adobe stock image, so we're gonna quickly make this work. Um, but yeah, so I mean, with printed murals, like it's kind of like you have a lot of freedom. So like the one I did with Prudential, that one's printed on fabric and it's stretched over a display. It's on my Behance if you decide to see it, if anyone wants to like go look at it.
Do you
But
want to pull it up, Shauna, for us to see quick?
let me see if I can get it up quickly enough.
And I think the
Quiet.
cool thing about these, I want to say murals and printed murals, is that you're going to be able to, especially with the size, see every single little detail and brushstroke, which makes them so cool.
Yeah. Okay, so here it is. Like that's the digital mural.
That's
And
stunning.
that was it printed out.
That looks incredible. And it really like curves, like they've got it printed in a way that it curves.
Yeah, because it's fabric, so it just lays right
That's
over it. And there are
awesome.
four of us total that did them. These were the ones I sent as like sketches. Fun fact: this little adopt a rescue, the dog, that's my mom's dog, Simon. So it was a really fun project, and it was fun because I got to go do drawing in person for it, which was a really fun, gig. Okay, so I have duplicated my background mostly just because I like to keep one layer intact, and I'm gonna do a little bit of. We're just gonna do a little bit of generative fill to get rid of a couple elements that I don't want in here. But yeah, printed murals though are like it's really accessible that way, and it's a great thing you can pitch to clients. Ann Chen, who goes by Ann Lettering on Instagram and Threads and other avenues, talks about it more in depth and has a lot of experience with it and pitching it to clients and has been really successful with it. So definitely worth like checking out. So I just want to kind of get rid of these two dark areas, and then I'll get rid of this dark area, and then we're going to go crazy.
We have a question in the chat for you, Shauna, and it's, have you attempted the CIE Lab color mode workflow or multi-tone workflow, or is that something left for processing by a pre-press technician?
I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what that is.
That's okay. Maybe we can get
Um,
a little bit more clarification in the chat keys. That would be so appreciated. We have
yeah.
everyone in the chat that is loving how the transformation is coming to life, Shauna. So this is incredible. And you're using generative fill right now. How are you loving that feature?
I like it for like removing stuff like this because it makes my life really, really easy.
It's a game changer, I feel like, once you really dive into it.
Mhm. Yeah, it definitely just it makes life very easy. It has allowed me to expand my uh images if I need more content to it. Like it's been great for that. Right now I'm just getting rid of anything that's like too stark that's going to detract and distract. Yeah, no, in all fairness, in regards to pre-press, my friends and I, when we were in school, we didn't have the best pre-press education. Our teacher knew his stuff, but he didn't know the modern stuff. So we were learning stuff like from the 80s. Um, and we were supposed to go on a trip to a pre-press or to like a printing facility to like get a tour and stuff, and we never did. So it wasn't until I was at my internship where they were going to go do a press check that they had me come along, and I was like, I've never been to one of these, and we were supposed to do this in school, and we never went on a tour. And so when we were there, the art director was like, "Can we also go on a tour? Because she's never seen this." So like they were really, really supportive of me. But it was fun to see because then I also got to see the process of like how you tell them the color's wrong or whatever. Um, all right, so I have a folder for my color adjustments. What we're going to do is we're going to take the color saturation down on the wall. We're going to make it lighter. We're going to turn it basically white. So it be as if you were painting the base down for a mural. Um, so I'm going to start with my hue and saturation, and I'm just going to take it all the way down. And what I'll do is I will pull back in the stuff at the bottom once I've finished doing this, just because we don't want the whole thing to be black and white because there's grass and stuff in here. Our color balance, which, oh, no, wrong one. I wanted to do black and white. That was it. So what black and white will let me do is just kind of adjust. There we go. Kind of adjust the shades based on like what's in the image. And then okay, that one doesn't do anything. We're going to use the curves, pull that up just a little bit. And then,
So the end goals, we're hoping for a white wall, right, Shauna?
yes, as white as we can get to where it remains believable. So, like on the far left here, it's too much, white. So I'm just going to use a gradient on the mask so that it blends a little better. So you've got that. And then I'm going to pull a levels. We're just going to do a little bit of adjusting here. And then
And
I'm
while
going to,
you're working on that, Shauna, it looks like I misread you the question. So I'm going to read you the full
oh,
question. There was another half to it. Thank you for that, Keys. So the full question is there's been a few advancements in color and reproduction accuracy in print these past few years, especially with inks that are beyond the limited gamut of CMYK. And then that's where we start talking about pre-press technicians.
okay. I'm actually have not had an opportunity to do that, but I do know a lot of like print on demand places are now doing like PNGs and RGB. So
I've noticed that too. And it makes it kind of easy if you're somebody that doesn't have that experience too.
yeah. If anyone's wondering what I just did, you'll see why I did this in a moment. This is gonna go above the mural, but basically I duplicated all of my layers and then I did what's called a high pass on them, and I set it to linear light. So what it did was you can't see it very well, but you can get more of the detail here that you kind of lose when you're adjusting these colors. and especially when I go to overlay the mural. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to use the um, rectangle tool. I'm going to drag it to the width of the image here. And then we're going to turn this into a smart object. And then we're going to use Command J, duplicate it. I'm going to pull that into the mural folder. And then this first one, I'm going to write art here. We're going to take the fill down to 0 because this is the layer you're going to edit to put your art into. The one down here is what is going to go on the wall and you'll manipulate. So I'm going to double click to open that file up. I'm going to go back to my Pride mural. I went and I duplicated and combined all my layers before we moved over so that I had just one image. So we're doing rectangle 11 is where we're throwing this into. Going into rectangle, there's our mural. So I'm going to turn off the background here. We're going to expand this. And then
The colors make me so happy, Shauna. You did such a good job with those colors.
Ah, thanks. So then we're going to save and we're going to close that. And then we're going to go back to so there's our mural within the piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to linear burn. We're going to do Command T. And then we're going to hold down Command as we pull on the points to adjust it so that it is to scale within our shape. So I could, in theory, pull this all the way down here. And then see where this ends is right here. And then you can see kind of right here, we have a little bit that disappears. So I'm going to go and I'm going to enable the warp tool by hitting the button at the top here. You hold down Command on wherever you want to add an additional point. And so I'm going to now pull that upwards. Wrong button.
It happens. And just a heads up, Shauna, we have about, I want to say just under 10 minutes.
Okay, we can do this.
You got this. If anybody can do it, it's you.
Okay, so
I love how you can see the brick behind your mural, by the way. I think that just like gave it an extra wow factor.
Yes, it makes it work really well. And if you take your opacity down like 3%, it gives it just a little bit more dimension to it so you can see it better. So now what I'm going to do, because we have the color adjustments, I'm going to put a mask on that. And then I just have what I call my photo editing brush, and it's just a soft round brush. And we're going to make it nice and big so that we can unmask all this. And if I were doing this like for my portfolio, I would be a lot more accurate, which I'll go back later and, and be more accurate with it. But we want to just add this color back in so that it looks like it is supposed to. You could even go so far as to like, paint the door back in, but not sure that it's going to look quite as good because it's going to change the color of this, these elements here.
And I feel like you can still see it too, right?
Yeah. And what's fun is it kind of looks like you can see the texture through this. So it looks like it's painted on. And what this high pass did is like with the with the mural just doing a linear burn, you don't get as much of the texture through. So a high pass over that just brings a little more of that texture back in and makes it look like it's really painted on the wall. Ta-da, we did it.
This was so amazing, Shauna. And do you mind walking us through just kind of a high level overview of what we learned today and what you showed us?
Yes. Okay, so here's where we ended. We're going to go back to our mural here. And
It
then
looks so incredible. I can't believe you've done this in such a short amount of time.
in all fairness, it took me a few days to do this mural because it was I had one idea in mind to start, and then I was like, nah, it's not working. So I started over, as one
And that's
does.
okay. It's the creative process, right?
Exactly. So we created a mural for Pride. We have Love Out Loud. So we started with this sketch with some really fun floral elements and just something that would be really fun to look at if you were to encounter it, just like walking on the street. So we had our sketch. And then from there, I made a dark gray background and I actually did paint this in prior. So you get these nice little color variations and strokes. So you have that. And then we did our color flats where we played with these really nice, vibrant colors inspired by Pride. And then we added in the details. And then what I did was I took the color flats file of the two folders with my flats and my details. I selected them and I hit Command J so that it duplicated them. And then I did Command E to merge them. And then what I ended up doing was taking the background, hitting Command J, and then moving it up, selecting the mural and merging those as well. So that's how we got the movable, basically a JPEG within the file here. So then what we did was we went into our Adobe stock image, and we're going to turn all this off. We select all of our little adjustments here. We did some generative fills to get rid of some of these elements in here that would be distracting and would be a bit harder to work with. So we got rid of these black marks on the wall. We got rid of this fire hydrant that kind of looks like a chess piece. And then I went in and we did color adjustments. So we started with just doing a black and white filter, and that allowed us to pull the red to it turns everything black and white, but you can adjust your blacks and white based on what colors are in your composition. And then we added a curves layer. And then I did another curves layer where I just duplicated the same one and I did a gradient on the mask so that it only applied to the side that was a bit darker that I wanted to lighten up. And then I did a levels adjustment where I just took it up like the slightest bit. There's like barely any editing in that one. And then we have a mask on this. So originally it was like that. Once we put the mural in, I did enable them. I added in a mask so you can see that there's like some grass down here that I would need to mask out in the mural itself so it shows through. But in the meantime, what I did is I combined the background and the adjustments together. I did Command J. I did Command E so that it was one layer on itself, and I brought it above my mural folder. I went to filter, I went to other, I went to high pass, and what it does is it just kind of bumps up some of the saturation that I might need where there's like details. And I hit OK. And then I set that to linear light, and then I turned it off for now because you can't really see a difference when it's like that. We then did the rectangle tool. We pulled it to the width of our composition. I set it to a smart object, and then I duplicated it. So we had our smart object within the mural folder, and then we also had it on the above that, and that one I labeled art here because that's where I'm putting the art. The other one is the one that I do any adjustments and things to. The one that says art here, I brought it down to a 0% fill so that you don't see it at all, because if I had it on, it would ruin the whole thing because then you don't see any of the adjustments or effects you do to it. So we double clicked, we added our file into this smart object. I hit save, I closed it, and then I went over into my mural file into the folder here, and I did a transform on it just to move it around a bit so that it fit the scale. So if you were looking at a wall that was like had perspective, you can change the perspective and make it look like it's actually on the wall, which is really kind of cool. And then from there, I went and I turned the high pass on. The mural file itself that you can see, I brought down to 97%. So it's just a little bit pulled back in the opacity so that it looks a little more realistic. And we have this lovely mural that looks like it was painted on the wall.
And you did such an incredible job, Shauna. Thank you so much for taking us through this process with you. Where can everybody follow you and stay connected?
They can find me on pretty much every social media. Excuse me, at Shauna Parmesan.
I love
And
your
I'm
name,
very
by the way.
thank you. Yeah, it was a kind of a joke in high school because no one could say punchition. So because it's Ukrainian. And at the time I didn't know it was actually pronounced punchition. I thought it was panchazan. So, short story long. But yeah, so it's Shauna Parmesan on basically all social media or shaunalynn.com. And you can also find my social media through there. So
This
yeah,
has
thank you
been
guys
so
for
incredible. And I know the
joining.
mods are, of course, and I know the mods are going to drop this in the chat. So thank you so much, Shauna. And it was such an honor having you here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast and you were a wonderful host. I greatly appreciate you.
Thank you so much. And for everybody, make sure that you stick around. We've got a really cool segment coming up with the students of High Tech High School, where they're going to be sharing how they use Adobe Express and Premiere Pro to create their weekly newscast. And trust me when I say you don't want to miss this. Thank you, guys.